I called this the Pervert's Guide to Church. And the reason for that is because in psychoanalysis, perversion in Lacanian psychoanalysis is marked by a particular way of avoiding knowledge called disavowal. So basically there are three main ways that we avoid a confrontation with lack. There is repression, disavowal, and foreclosure. And disavowal is interesting because disavowal is the idea that someone can know something and nevertheless believe the opposite. Right. So the structure of disavowal, at its core, it's a very particular type of knowledge that we're talking about, and I will come to that in a second. But the fetish object, so the fetishist as a form of perverse structure, is someone who knows that an object is normal, and yet they need that object in order to facilitate a sexual relationship with another. So they know very well that the object is just an object. Nevertheless, this object has a type of magical existence. It has a libidinal function, and without it, the fetishist has deep problems with social or sexual interaction. Okay. So in basic analytic frame, what the fetish object does is there's a certain point when the infant is confronted with the fact that the other, the mother usually, the mother-other, the primary caregiver, they realize that that primary caregiver is lacking, is also a creature of desire, is not an omnipotent God, but is someone who has worries and anxieties and has dissatisfactions and looks elsewhere for the fulfillment of some of those dissatisfactions. So the infant isn't the only place that the other goes for their enjoyment. And so it's not just you and the mother-other. There is a third. There is something else. And this realization in the infant that the other is lacking is often given the name castration. And castration is not primarily the idea that I am lacking. It is the idea that the other is lacking. Very briefly, there's three terms that Lacan uses for this encounter with lack, and it is frustration, castration, and privation. So frustration is the easiest to understand. That's where the child sometimes is fed and sometimes isn't. So frustration comes from not having something that you can get. That's frustration. So that's the first form of lack, is like I'm not getting this sustenance that I require, and that can be frustrating. Then castration is the idea that the other is lacking, and this is at the level of what's called the symbolic. And then privation is the name that's given to the idea that this lacking is fundamental. It's not something that is provisional, it can be overcome, but it's part of the very nature of what it is to be a subject. So those are the three things: frustration, castration, privation. And in perversion, there is a kind of problem, a lack of acknowledgement of castration. So in perversion, if you go with this Lacanian idea, the perverse structure is one in which the child somehow refuses to acknowledge castration, refuses to acknowledge that the other is lacking. And what happens then is, in fetishism, the fetish object is what is used to cover over the lack. It's the object, it's the phallus, the phallic object, the object of completion and wholeness that avoids you confronting the lack in the other. Right. Now I'm going to break all that down. I just want to get that out for a second and then maybe make it more understandable.